There was a time in American automotive history when automobiles could be considered works of art. In those times, every car had a distinctive appearance. Some consider the golden age of automotive design to have begun in the late 1920s and peaked in the 1930s. When the country was suffering through a depression in the 1930s, a few auto manufacturers continued to offer outstanding designs. Models that spoke of luxury, styling, and speed. These were the cars that movie stars drove, the car in which business leaders and heads of state were proud to be seen. Today, most of the names are just memories of the past. True, Cadillac and Lincoln still ply our highways, but one car like no other etched its name in automotive history. It survived for 59 years. Royalty, sheikhs, and maharajas were seen in them. Fortunate Americans were proud to say, "Ask the man who owns one." That car was Packard. Hello, I'm Edward Herman. Welcome to Packard, an American classic car. Those 59 years of manufacturing ended in 1958, when the last car with a Packard name rolled off the assembly line. However, a few decades earlier, the name Packard had a stunning reputation, particularly among the who's who in America. Many Hollywood celebrities of the 1930s and 40s adopted Packard as their car of choice. They included Eleanor Powell, Bob Hope, Gary Cooper, Harold Lloyd, Jean Harlow, Dick Powell, Ed Wynn, Louis B. Mayer, Tony Curtis, Clark Gable, and Eddie Cantor, to name just a few. One Packard that was owned by a film star is described by Ralph Morano.
This is a 1937 Packard convertible Victoria bodied by Darren, who was a coach builder at the time and built very many elaborate body styles for the movie stars. This particular car was built for Clark Gable. It's got many unique features. Packard used to use fancy hood ornaments, as long as the other cars did in that time, and this one acts as the radio antenna also. Other accessories, we've got the Packard road lights, which are amber for the time, and we also, on the top of the headlights, you have speed strips, which make the car look like it's moving when it's standing still. Under the hood, we've got a twin carbureted aluminum head straight 8, 288 cubic inches, which was more than enough power for this car at the time. In these times, the cars were very aerodynamic. This car has suicide doors, which open the opposite way, and you back yourself in. These particular cars were really made for the roof to be down. Clark Gable gave this car up because it had one problem. When he stopped at a traffic light, the girls would stand on the running boards and fall in on him. So he actually went back, traded the car back in, and Earl Flynn ended up with the car. He didn't care about the running boards. I guess he wanted the girls to fall on him. Also, we've got the whole look of the car comes down, and it also has skirts which fit the back, so it gives a closed feeling, and it just ends the aerodynamic look of the car.
Entertainment people were not the only ones who selected a Packard automobile. The Packard motor car was used as a parade vehicle until the early 1950s, and several foreign governments kept a Packard in their stable of cars. While Packard became known as an exclusive brand for the wealthy, starting in the early teens and going into the 1920s and 30s, the company's birthplace was in Warren, a small town in Ohio. The Packard brothers, James Ward and William Dowd, were the founders of the Packard enterprise. However, it took the experience of driving another vehicle to prompt the brothers to launch a car that would herald an era of luxury automobiles.
James Ward actually went to Cleveland, Ohio and purchased his Winton in the mid-1890s. And upon bringing the Winton home to Warren, Ohio, actually had several breakdowns, and when he got to Warren, he was a little bit concerned and actually felt that he could actually improve this new Winton automobile. He contacted Mr. Winton and actually offered a few suggestions. Mr. Winton was not real accepting to his ideas and actually suggested that maybe he wants to build an automobile of his own. Mr. James Ward Packard actually proceeded to do just that, and in 1899 actually produced his first Packard automobile.
A few years before building their first automobile, the Packard brothers had founded the Packard Electric Company in 1890. In 1892, they formed the New York and Ohio Company, which manufactured incandescent lamps and transformers. The third partner in the company was George L. Weiss, an early investor in the Winton Motor Carriage Company. This trio later formed the Packard and Weiss Partnership in July 1899. They hired Winton's shop foreman, William Hatcher, to build the first Packard. On November 6, 1899, the first Packard was driven on the streets of Warren, Ohio. 5 automobiles were built in 1899, and 49 were built in 1900. The enterprise became known as the Ohio Automobile Company. One of those early cars has survived all these years. Terry Martin shares his thoughts about this car.
Well, owning a 1900 Packard that was built in Warren, Ohio is very special to me. Living here, and it happens to be the home of the Packard brothers, where the company was founded in 1899. And this being the 1900 model in the first year, of course, it makes it very rare, and therefore it's a real pleasure for me to exhibit the car, particularly here in the National Packard Museum.
2 years later, in 1902, the enterprise changed its name to the Packard Motor Car Company. One Model F, a standard 1903 Packard runabout, was taken off the production line and used as a promotion to prove the viability of the automobile. Called Old Pacific, this Packard commenced its historic transcontinental journey in San Francisco on June 20, 1903. Powering this Model F car was a 1-cylinder, 12-horsepower engine, which was mounted under the seat. The car weighed 2,200 pounds and could travel at a top speed of 40 miles per hour. But traveling at this speed was often impossible because of harsh terrain, rough roads, or the complete lack of roads. During the transcontinental trip, driver E.T. Tom Fetch, Packard's plant foreman, was accompanied by Marius C. Krupp, editor of the Automobile magazine. They met the challenges of the 65-day journey and reached New York on the evening of August 21st. During the trip, the car needed no major repairs. Tom Fetch's remarks upon completion of the record-breaking journey were short. "Thank God it's over." Another car, a Winton, had completed a cross-country run a few weeks earlier, but Packard had followed a more difficult route and still beat Winton's time by a day and a half. While Old Pacific made that historic run in 1903, another Packard, which is at the National Packard Museum in Warren, Ohio, has a similar history. Terry Martin explains.
This is the 1903 Model F built here in Warren. This was the last year that it was produced here in Warren before the move to Detroit. And one of the features that it has is the tilting steering wheel. I know this was popular in the 50s or whatever, where they could tilt the steering wheel. And this particular car has a special place in the museum because of the fact that it was driven across the United States in 1983. It was a 62-day trip, some 3,200 miles, and it was not without difficulty, though. And I have to say thanks to my son John, who was the machinist. He kept it running, and I just handled the publicity part of it. And with us happened to be the man whose uncle drove the first Packard across the United States. His name was Tom Fetch, and that particular Packard is in the Henry Ford Museum. So there are 2 1903 Packards that have crossed the country, and this is one of them.